Hi, everyone. So today I invited one of my dearest friends, and she is also one of the mentor and advisor on our Elite Link Education Board. She has so many talent. She's the only person that I cannot put her in short sentences or bio, because normally I have very nice things to say about my guest, but her, I have to ask her to introduce herself. So May, could you introduce the amazing you to all the audience?
Okay, I can do that. I guess the fun part of this is that for you guys, because I think most of you are trying to think career, the way to think about what I've done for a living is I've worked at Goldman Sachs, I've worked at Morgan Stanley. I actually built a business with a very, very dear friend of mine. We got sales to $2 million in about 2 years, which I don't even think I realized at the time what an accomplishment that was to go from 0 to 2 million in sales in like 2 years. And then I came back into industry. I've worked on that hedge fund side. I've managed lots of capital. And then I've also been head of risk. I've done, and then I think usually when I looked back at all of it, at one point I was advising almost $1 trillion in assets. So it's kind of this crazy, strange hodgepodge of stuff in my background. Because you guys are probably just coming out of college and you're trying to figure out what did she do as far as background goes. I went to Northwestern. I graduated from Northwestern undergraduate. And then after working for a while, I ended up going to Columbia for my master's in quantitative methods. I'll pause there and you guys, because I know there's a bunch of stuff that you and your audience need to get through.
Yes, because there's just so much about May, and so basically there's some buzzword I want you guys know about her is she is also a world traveler. She has been to a lot of countries. So it's I always wonder like, does she even sleep? Because she does so much stuff, like all the great experience in investment, in data, tech. And she also give public speaking for like women in tech or data related topic. So yeah, I do need to write an essay about her. And she is also a book writer. She has her own course. Now she's a professor. And also she's our mentor. So it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, like, okay. So if you guys more interested in her background, please go to our website or her website to see her bio. Okay, it's very long. Okay, so without further ado, I want to start our first question. So I know May graduated from Northwestern for undergrad, but I also know you transferred from a liberal arts school. A
I
lot of
did.
Yes, a lot of our audience are curious about like why, like how to choose between liberal arts school and a bigger university, and since you have both experience and you did the transfer, so could you share your experience there?
Sure. So I think kind of it's a bit important as well to go back to why I transferred and what I think I could have done differently in that regard. At the time that I was looking for colleges, I had a concern about whether or not I'd be able to afford it. And I went to Colgate because I got an amazing scholarship that basically paid for everything. And Colgate is a wonderful school. It's highly ranked, it's highly regarded. But what I came to realize was that it didn't have the right resources that I specifically needed to feel like I could launch my life and be successful. So what do I mean by that? Colgate is a small liberal arts college with an amazing alumni network, but it's located in an area that you really need a car if you're going to try to interview from. And I didn't have that. I mean, I really came from humble beginnings versus Northwestern, which is just outside of the city of Chicago. You can take the train from Evanston down to Chicago and interview to your heart's content if that was something that you needed to do. So 2 years at Colgate, amazing. Okay, I will say that if I compared the two, the administration at Colgate was so fantastic. They definitely demonstrated what it's like to have a small number of students relative to administrators. And you can look at that on websites. You know, I think it was like at the time, either 8 or 10 to 1 as far as faculty goes. And as a result of that, they knew who you were. Northwestern has the same sort of thing, but Northwestern as a larger school has other schools that are also really important to them. So if the administration is still great at Northwestern, please, Northwestern people, don't come and find me. But I would say that relative to a liberal arts that's only focusing in on their undergraduate program and really kind of, honing in, it's a totally different experience. One feels like you're part of a very tiny family. The other feels like you're part of a much larger family, but still. And so definitely easier to navigate Colgate versus Northwestern. Wait, there's some other questions in there that you wanted me to focus in on as far as the choosing your college goes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
So,
Why did you choose to transfer? Yeah.
Okay, so the why I chose to transfer really had to do with job, as well as I had never lived in a big city. And also one of the things, and this might be more particular to Southern America at this particular time in history, I never really been around a lot of Chinese people, for lack of a better way to describe it. Chicago does have a lot of Chinese people. And I think that it sounds really strange in retrospect, but I think that college is a time that you should be trying to find who you are, both career and then what is the nature of who you are as a person. Chicago gave me that opportunity because I could go down to Chinatown. Yeah. And it's, I think if I could do it all again at the time, money was really the major thing that drove my decision for college. If that wasn't an issue, I absolutely think it's so important that people try to learn about the college. What's it like? What's the student vibe like? What's their culture? How does it feel? Is there someone that's very similar to me? Super duper important, because ultimately, even though I will never say anything negative about Colgate because the administration was so amazing, but the culture wasn't what I needed specifically at that time in my life. And Northwestern was just a little bit more, closer to the culture I needed. In fairness, when I then went to Columbia, that probably would have been a great culture for me as well. Although I was so small town kid, I think I would have gotten lost at Columbia as an undergraduate. So it's really hard to say, even though Columbia and Northwestern, when you look at them on paper, they look similar. New York is just that much bigger of a city. And then it's just Columbia has its own additional stuff that is great, but at the same time is specific to Columbia. So,
well, I love that. Everything you said is exactly how we normally coaching our students for the education consulting. So when anybody choose their college, it's not a good idea just to look at the US News ranking. Because it's like you choose your soulmate, or you choose a good friend, like your bestie. You need to make sure that school is good for you at the stage where you are. Just like May said,
it's years of your life. It's not a period of your life. Yeah,
exactly. So if she choose undergrads, choose Columbia, it might be too overwhelming for her, even though it's the top school. And then when she choose Columbia for her graduate school, it's just perfect. So I love that, because everybody need to hear that. A lot of things are relatable,
Yeah. By the time I had already worked in New York for a long time, I mean, I'm a New Yorker, right? Even though obviously I grew up in the small town, all these things, but I'm such a New Yorker at this point. And having lived in New York for a while and having been in a city for a while was a lot easier for me going back to grad school. But I'm fairly sure as an undergraduate, I would have been crushed by that statement too much.
I love that you share that. It's so relatable to a lot of our students and our audience. So the next question. So after you finished your college, you went to finance. Okay, that's a lot of amazing stories there. And you went to Goldman, JP Morgan, all the fancy or big name institutions. So could you share being a Wall Street women, can you share your experience? Why did you choose finance, and what was your experience working in finance?
Okay, so I probably chose my career for the single worst reason, which is I just need to pay back. I ended up with a very small loan, which now I realize was the world's smallest loan. But at the time, you're just overwhelmed because it's more debt than you personally have been on the line for. It's not like it was very scary. And I knew Wall Street would pay. So I would hustle like crazy every day at the career center trying to get interviews, because I wasn't, in fairness, the best student at Northwestern. People are just really smart. What can I say? But what I lacked at the time in smarts relative to my peers, I made up for in hustle. And so I literally would take any interview that was an opportunity, period. And what would happen is that the really smart kids that everyone was choosing first would get all of the interview slots. It's a very strange data thing that I now understand is a particular strange just thing. So resumes would come into an employer. Having been on the other side, I now understand. And literally every company is choosing the same 100 students or something like that. But what happens is, as those students start to get job offers, they stop interviewing. And so these interview slots open up. And I would just go every day and try to get the interview slots of companies that I thought could pay back my loans, of which Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley were both two companies that ultimately I worked for, strangely enough, but Goldman Sachs first and then later Morgan Stanley. But I also got offers from the two of them.
Mhm.
So that's how I ended up in finance. I did already have some interest in finance as far as that goes. I had been doing stock market games online. My very, very best friend was a stockbroker in general, although I went straight into institutional. She was on the retail side. So she encouraged it. She thought I'd be great at it. But I'll tell you, one of the most important things was getting kind of life skills, in the sense that when you work at the larger investment banks at that time, aside from just academic excellence, they are looking for people that are adequately mature to be in meetings. So I think that's always difficult. And especially if you're not from the US and you're not from big city culture and all that stuff, getting that experience and exposure by putting yourself out there, by being at activities and having to interact with just older people. If you can demonstrate that acumen when you're speaking, is very important. Additionally, there were some other things that I had on my resume that were just flat out sales oriented. And what happens if you do take internships or something related to sales, the core skill of that is speaking to others in a way that's persuasive, right? That's really the core skill of sales. And you will observe that in other individuals that are incredibly, incredibly talented salespeople, and you'll attempt to try to integrate some of that into yourself. But it turns out that even if ultimately you're not interested in going in sales, everything in life requires that kind of persuasive communication. Everything in life still requires you be incredibly personable and interesting when people are listening to you and talking to you. So no matter what, I think sales jobs sales jobs are not hard for young people to get as an internship or otherwise.
Mhm.
But they're oftentimes looked down upon because they think, oh no, I need a job at a fancy bank doing some kind of paperwork. Okay, if you can get that, that's amazing. It's fantastic experience. But let's say you're one of the others that make those people look good in life because they got them, then you can also just get a sales job and try to take in all of the wonderful skills of the person that you're learning from.
I love that. That's just so helpful.
Yeah.
Because I actually had the chance to talk with a lot of Fortune 500 company HR, and a lot of them are talking about how fierce the competition is. And
Very
on
fierce.
one side, it's so hard for the company to recruit a new employee because it's expensive, it's time consuming. But on the other side, there's so many new graduate. It's so hard for them to find any job. Just like May said, there are some hardcore skills on the resume that the companies are look for. For example, like sales, like marketing skills, even though it's totally unrelated position, if you have marketing skills, sales skills, they would still think that's a very, very important skills for the company. So, and then also, like if you have experience work with social media, that's something very popular, like a skill that's very, very demanding right now. Now, of course, data, right? If you can use like a data analytic, like Python or R, like you can use it to process data. That's also wonderful on your resume. So building skills, because right now with tons of people are so smart, just like May said, people want to see like very useful skills on the resume. So
Absolutely. It's
yeah.
it's so true. And then also, like I know anyone would hire you any day of the week because they can just look at your YouTube or your various social medias and think, this girl is incredibly presentable. If I stick her in front of a client, she's going to crush it. I don't really have to worry about what she's going to say or do or what have you. She's not going to feel awkward. She's going to be like great in front of the public. That just took time, right? Like you built that skill from exercising it through different things. You've been doing this for a long time, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't even matter. Yeah.
Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No.
So basically, because there's so many questions that I want to get out of her.
Yeah.
Too much to offer. Okay. So I also know because she shared so many wonderful experiences and stories. So I know one thing, that to some point you were the only female member in the team at work. So how does that feel, like the women in finance?
Okay. I think that I'm so stoked for how the world is moving, because it is not pleasant to be the only woman in a meeting. Like, yeah, I love feeling special, but realize that so like obviously Asian women, we don't age, so to speak, so we won't go there. But yeah, it's important. Don't let that stress create a bunch of wrinkles. If I could teach you anything, that would be the one thing that's probably the most important. But in my particular generation, you still had the female discount a little bit. And I always trained for any of the young people that were underneath me. I would tell them that if they were in a meeting and there's only one woman, you better believe that girl's probably pretty smart. So don't discount her, because she may actually be the decision maker. And that was true towards the end before I resigned and retired and just started gallivanting the world. But I will say that I would say that there are a few things that every woman should know if they're in finance or any professional career. Number one is, don't try to be a man. I think for the first 2 to 3 years I tried to dress like in these ways that you're told at school, very boxy, very masculine, all that stuff. And then my friends that were very successful, because I always had great mentors, I was very fortunate in that regard, but they were older, very successful women, older than me at the time. In fairness, they're not old. They took me aside. They were like, okay, May, this can't continue. You can't dress like that anymore. And then I was like, wait, what am I doing? But and they're like, all right, look, you are this type of person. We know you dress very well. You see how scary it is for other guys to come talk to you like in real life when you're like not dressed like that. I'm like, yeah. They're like, it turns out that if you are just a very well-dressed but professionally dressed woman, you're actually scarier, not less scary than if you're too boxy and like all these other things. Oddly enough, as a function of that, I then just dressed the way I found my professional style, which definitely takes time. I'm not going to lie. But then after that, my attire became something that was as much a part of my ability to command, professional presence as anything else. I think I had more than one woman at all levels just come up to me privately and be like, May, how do you, like, where are you shopping? Like, it would always shock me because I thought they were going to ask me about some finance thing that I had just given a lecture on, but they were like, look, I think you're amazing. I really enjoyed. So they asked me like a few professional questions. They'd be like, where do you go shopping?
Fashion.
So, fashion is important. But other than that, I think that in my generation, men were not aware of their poor behavior and learning the advanced social skills to manage that and really identify when you weren't going to be able to make any kind of inroads because that person was so ingrained in this certain thing. And then trying to like assess how far could you get in this circumstance and what would be the correct strategy to communicate with this person and still have it work out. That's something that my generation probably had to deal with quite a lot and still deals with. I'm hoping that in your generation, that just resolves itself because it sucks, quite frankly.
Well, I love the way you put it, because I think it's not pretending to be someone that you are not, not
Yeah.
only I try to be more mature, like try to be like when I started to be a CEO at a younger age, I was
Yeah.
like, I should look older. I should look like I have 30 years experience. And obviously I don't have that because I'm like too young to have that kind of experience, but I try to be someone that is not me, which is awkward. Not only awkward for myself, but also awkward for the people in the room. They just don't
Totally.
know. Yeah, they don't know how to identify me. And
Yeah.
when I try to pretend, it's just myself feel lack of confidence, and people just think, oh, I'm just like, oh, is everybody like start to doubt me, like, oh, this person looks too young, or like, well, like just so many questions running through my head. I can't even focus on the topic that I should really focus on. So I love that you said you don't want to be like, don't be a man, or don't be someone that is not you. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't do it because you can't keep it up for very long. That's really what it is. You can't be not yourself forever and then expect to have all the confidence and exude that. Because remember, as a leader, what your job is you have to make someone else not scared. That's actually one of the key components. You're asking people in a lot of cases, now in some cases the management role is different, but in a lot of cases you're asking someone to do something that they're afraid to do, or that it might be new for them. And you want them to be like, I got this. This is gonna be amazing, right? So you can't look at all times like you don't have it at all. And also, I think too, it kind of goes both ways, because if you seem like someone that is sincere, right? So there have been times where the whole team, including myself, is doing something new.
Mm-hmm.
If you're more vulnerable about that, you're like, look, we're going to try this. I think we're going to make it. And I feel really good about it, but I actually don't know either. So let's just all give it our best go. If you have that kind of presence with your team where they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's get you. But you want that you want to be in a place where you can share that enthusiasm. You want to be in that place where you can be authentically you. As you move through management, as you move through your career, for sure. I don't know if that kind of speaks to what you're talking about.
I love it. And
it should be like Serene, be a CEO really early. It's like, that's what I'm really saying.
I love all her story. And after you had a huge success in finance, you choose to go back to school. Why is that? And why data?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was 2008. And at the time it was the crisis, and I was so burnt out, and I could just see how the industry was going to be. And also, because the nature of my job was very quantitative and I only had a bachelor's, I felt insecure. In retrospect, should I have felt insecure? I don't know. It's really hard because you can't play back the past and think, oh, should I have done this? Should I have done that? No, you have to just kind of play life forward. Given where the cards sit now, what are we going to do going forward? I can't regret what just happened. And at that time, I really felt like I needed at least a master's. A lot of the roles were asking for at least a master's or a PhD in some kind of math. And even though if you looked at my resume, legitimately, you would see math. You know what I mean? Like I literally, for Morgan Stanley, it was just after they had purchased this company called Bara. And I was training people on multi-factor models all across Wall Street. And because, oddly enough, one of the skills that I had cultivated through high school and college was public speaking, I was really good at it. So even though you'd have these like super math nerds that just had PhDs and what have you, it turned out because they didn't have the public speaking training component, their value in training others to this mathematical model and to these data sets was close to zero. Sorry, I mean, some of you were amazing, but in fairness, some of you just did not have any kind of ability to understand that your audience didn't understand you. So that was, so at that time, but for whatever reason, I personally felt like I wanted to solidify those hard skills. I'm glad I did. I mean, to this day, I teach, I work now for Franklin University, which is a smaller university in the Midwest, but I love them. And I really focus in on trying to not just explain the math from the textbook perspective, which I think is largely unapproachable. Some people are just brilliant and can read it and just get it. but I spent a lot of time trying to reframe how you would think about that math in actual words, because guess what? Once you get into your job, if you do any math, you better be able to explain it in words that even people with no math but are incredibly smart can understand. So I went back, I got my master's, and then I realized that most people actually don't know how to explain the math in any kind of meaningful way. Quite a lot of people are faking that they know.
Love that you
Which is
mentioned
so-
it. It's
yeah.
like they have all these inner smartness, but when they say things, it just doesn't make any sense to anybody. So I always ask my student, think about, you need to expand this to your family. If your grandma can understand, then you nailed it.
Yeah. And you can't feel bad about the fact that you don't have a skill. That one you can never do. So a lot of times what I would do, in particular with my customers that needed my analytical stuff, is I would take a shot at it. And then if they didn't get it, I'd be like, tell me what part was hard for you to understand. You've got to be able to take feedback in life. And they'd be like, they'd like basically say the meanest stuff about my charts. The meanest stuff. And I'd be like, okay, give me 24 hours. Let me try to show it differently or something. And then I'd go back and attempt to like correct it. I think I would say that if there's one benefit from being a woman in finance, let's call it, and not, is that during my period of time, men, for better or for worse, I'm just going to say it, had no problem telling you that you were wrong, silly, dumb, incorrect, like all these things that are just horrific in HR land today. During my time, they were happy to tell you you were wrong. Do you know what I mean? And in the worst, meanest possible way. But if you were able to overcome the thick skin of it and just try to take out the portion that probably no one should ever say to someone in a certain way, and then be like, okay, there's something about this analysis that didn't speak for itself. What can I do? Then, you would, there's growth in there. There's definitely growth in there. But in general, I would say too, that because of the period in which I worked, having true hard skills and being really good at your job and really feeling confident that you were not wrong and that you did know what you're talking about. And that is kind of core. And especially in something like finance, even if I'm not to take away the male female, regardless, it's an industry where people get very passionate. So I'm not saying everybody was the way that we're kind of joking a little bit about. A lot of the guys in the industry were amazing, and without them, I wouldn't have learned things. I wouldn't have had opportunities. So please don't get me wrong when I say that. But really having hard skills and being confident that you understood it, that is so important. I think when you're young in particular, it's just an extra thing. And then being confident and being able to take that feedback and turn it into a good place, especially if you're in an environment where passions run high because there's a lot of money involved or what have you. That's very important as well.
I think the great takeaway is, so when you have a great university name, right? It's like your entry ticket to a lot of this great institution or a company that you want to get hired. But after that, after you get into schools, because a lot of people try their best to get into the good school, but after you get in, the school name is just the school name. It's all about building your hard skills and your soft skills. Yeah, that's what are the company really look for. Maybe because you're graduating from Harvard, you're graduating from Columbia, that's like something like a word stand out. Like people would take one more look at your resume, but after that, it's all what did you do? What was your experience and what kind of skill you have? Yeah.
As such, there's all these other resources that go completely missed and empty. There's always a student center that will provide interview skills, oftentimes, all types of different things. And then obviously you guys do that to the next level. As far as that goes, you really try to help people like, look, you're going to interview. Let's just make sure that they take you very seriously. Let's talk about all these little nuances that you can't help but notice as an employer. So there's lots of these things that even if you are the brightest person, it's going to be hard. And if, if the soft skills are 0. And the way to think of it is there's this like really brilliant article I read once, and they were talking about the fact that a lot of times when you're doing reviews of people as employees, you will do something like, oh, this person's an amazing programmer, 100 out of 100, or 10 points, let's call it 10 points out of 10. And then communication skills, and they'll get like 10 points, like they'll get 1 point out of 10. And what happens is that adds up to 11. But this really brilliant human resources person, I think it's probably a Harvard Business Review type article. She said, you shouldn't do it that way. It should be done on a percentage basis. So you got 100% for your technical skills, and you got 10% for your communication skills. So instead of getting an average score of like, 50, if 20 divided by 11, you should only get, 10% of 100, which will give you 10%. So you get almost nothing, right? And the way to think about that is, because your communication skills are so bad, I can't even access your smarts, So that's what happens when when your user interface is so terrible, let's call it that way, then it doesn't actually matter how amazing the program is underneath, because no one can actually get to that amazing program underneath. And when we're talking about soft skills, the amazing stuff that you do for students that are young and still trying to grow that soft skills component, that's what you're trying to do, is to improve that user interface. So all that brilliant stuff that you just paid for through your university can come forward, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So actually May and I also designed like gamification in coaching and management. So we can always share like a lot of stuff. And if you guys think, and if you guys want her back on our podcast, please subscribe and hit like and leave comments for us. And it's always amazing to have May on our show, It's
always fun to hang out with Serene. I feel like, very honored to be a guest on her show, because I feel like she could do this lecture without me, quite frankly. Everybody try to be like Serene in life. You'll do great.
You're not sure about that, but yeah. Okay, thank you so much, May. And please, like, if you have any question for her, please leave in a comment, and we will get back to you. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.